Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel for another episode of the route learning series, this time recorded within Train Simulator. So in this episode I wanted to take another look at the Wherry Lines route from Armstrong Powerhouse. And I wanted to drive a journey that I've not yet driven on this route. So with every route that comes in the game, there's always at least two videos that you can make, the outward journey and the return journey. But with the Wherry Lines route, when you're heading away from Norwich, there's actually three different possible routes that you can take. And that gives us a total of 6 possible journeys that you can drive on this route. So I'm driving the 5th of the 6 journeys, so there's just going to be one left outstanding that I haven't yet covered after this video. And I'm going to be driving a journey using a scenario that comes with Armstrong Powerhouse scenario pack number 44, which is train 2 Juliet 81, which is the 1457 service from Lowestoft through to Norwich, for a total journey distance of around 23.5 miles, with just one stop along the way at Oulton Broad North, which is actually very close to the start of this journey, so it's almost a non-stop journey all of the way over to Norwich. I also wanted to cover this journey in a train that hasn't yet appeared on this channel before, so I'm going to be driving in a Class 68 diesel electric locomotive. So the train that I'm driving is actually formed of 2 Class 68 locomotives and 3 British Rail Mark II coaches in BR blue-grey livery. So this is a special sort of formation that was used during special services on this route a few years ago, although as far as I know now the Mark II coaches would no longer be able to be used due to the new rules surrounding the Disability Discrimination Act here in the UK. But the Class 68 diesel electric locomotive was built by Vossler Espana and Stadler Rail between 2013 and 2017, with a total of 34 of these locomotives produced. The wheel arrangement on each locomotive is a Bobo wheel arrangement, which means that for each bogie there is 4 wheels and 2 axles, rather than say a Coco wheel arrangement which has 6 wheels and 3 axles per bogie. Each locomotive weighs around 85 tonnes and they have a maximum speed of 100 miles per hour, though the maximum speed that we'll be able to get up to on this journey today is 60 miles per hour. They have a maximum power output of 3,800 horsepower or 2,800 kilowatts, with a maximum tractive effort of 317 kilonewtons or 71,000 pounds of force. The livery that's being used on the locomotives on this journey today is of course DRS Compass livery, which in my personal opinion is one of the best looking liveries to ever appear on locomotives within the UK. Now that I've jumped into the cab of the locomotive, let's just quickly set up here ready for departure. So the startup procedure is pretty standard to Armstrong Powerhouse products. Initially I need to press Shift and W to insert the master key, and then as I do so the AWS self-test sequence will go off before I've moved the reversing handle, in a slight difference to the usual setup procedures that we go through on this channel. So there we are, the AWS self-test sequence has now gone off. And we just got the computer voice saying TPWS and AWS operational. I'm now going to move the reversing handle into the forward position, and then when I do so, what it does, it actually increases the power by 1 notch for about 10 seconds before the power sets back down to an idling RPM. The next thing I'm going to do is press Shift and E to turn on the electrical train supply, so that we are supplying electricity to the coaches, but that does mean that the idling power is actually at a higher RPM than standard, so that the engine is generating enough electricity to supply the coaches. Now that I've done that, I'm going to press H to turn on the headlights, press I to turn on the instrument lights, and press Ctrl and D to turn on the driver safety device. Now that I've done that, let's just have a quick look at the cab controls here, just so that we can go through them briefly. So if we look on the left-hand side here, we actually have the train brake handle, which is a spring-loaded brake handle, a bit like what was in the Class 67, which I covered a few weeks ago on a journey in Scotland from Edinburgh to Glenrothes. So if you look above the brake handle, you can see there's 3 gauges towards the top of the screen, which are the brake gauges there. So as I release the brakes, you can see that the yellow needle moves first and then the red needle follows behind. So that's the brake pipe pressure. When the brakes are fully released, then the red needle is pointing at 5, the same as the yellow needle. Now if I want to apply the brakes, you just press and hold the apply button and then let go, and then it stops applying at that point, and the same with release. If I press release and then let go, it stops releasing at that point. So you get very precise control of the brake pressure in this locomotive. So the yellow needle is just showing the target pressure, and then the red needle is showing what the train's actually doing. So that's showing you as the pressure is falling what's actually happening. The gauge just to the right of that is the brake cylinder pressure gauge. Now of course when that's pointing at 0, then the brakes are fully released, and when the number is above 0, then the brakes are applied. Now the thing with the brake cylinder pressure gauge on this particular locomotive is that because it uses a blend of dynamic braking and air braking, that gauge doesn't always show a reading even though the brakes are applied. So as a result of that, I'm going to be using the brake pipe pressure gauge to judge how hard the brakes are applied when driving on this journey. If we continue around the cab now, in front of us we've got a speedometer measured in miles per hour, which has both an analog and a digital speed readout. And unlike with most speedometers, the analog readout actually only jumps in 1 mile per hour increments, a bit like the second hand on a clock where it jumps each second. So this will jump with every mile per hour, and it doesn't smoothly increase in speed. If we continue around the cab now, on the right hand side here we have the throttle control, which is actually a combined traction and brake controller with this particular locomotive. So it's currently in the idle position. As you pull it towards you, you have 8 notches of power that you can use to move the train, and then if you push it away from you from the idle position, it actually applies the dynamic braking, which is of course a braking system only used on the locomotive. Now from what I was reading in the manual that comes with this, you shouldn't use the dynamic braking unless you're running as a light locomotive, because when you use the standard air braking system, it actually blends the air and dynamic braking together. Now another thing to mention of course is the horn control, which I'm actually looking for and can't see in the cab right now. I do know it's a 2-toned horn controllable with the spacebar and the B key. I still can't actually see that horn control. I'm looking around the cab everywhere and I can't see anything moving, so I'm not actually sure exactly where in the cab it is, but just as long as you know the keys to operate it, that's the main thing. And now of course we have a gauge over here. I think that's the one. Yep, that's the locomotive brake, that particular lever. So you do have an independent air brake for the locomotive, which operates so the released position, the hold position, and then the apply position. And then when it's in the apply position, you want to move it back to the hold position to stop the brakes applying, and then back to the released position to fully release the brakes. And back over on the right hand side of the cab, of course, we have the computer display here, and the main things that I really wanted to look at are the 2 bars on the left hand side. So one of them is the tractive effort gauge, which shows us how much tractive effort the locomotive is putting in, and gradually that will fall as we increase in speed. And also just to the right of that, the middle bar actually shows you what position the throttle is in. So as I mentioned earlier, there's 8 notches of power on this throttle. So as you increase the throttle, then there will be a blue bar that appears to show you what position that power handle is in, and that's very helpful as you can't really always see the throttle when driving along. And of course we've also got the engine RPM there as well, which shows us just how fast the engine is turning and so on. So now we've had a quick look inside the cab, let's just take another look outside the train, and then we can depart and head out on our journey towards Norwich. Departing away from Lowestoft, the speed limit here is 60 miles per hour, with around 1.4 miles to go to our first stop, which is Oulton Broad North. So we're now passing what looks like a rather old abandoned yard on the left hand side, and then in a moment we're going to have a distance signal which is showing a cautionary aspect, and that's I think a bit of a bug in the game. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to reset the AWS as we pass that distance signal, and it appears to apply for a signal facing our direction on the opposite track that is at danger, which really shouldn't apply to us in reality from what I can tell. So what I'm going to do, as I say, I'm resetting the AWS now, so we've just come up on that distance signal, and then I've just shut off the power to allow the train to coast. In a moment I'm going to press tab just to request permission to pass that signal at danger, something I wouldn't normally do at this kind of speed, so I've just pressed tab now, and we've now got approval to pass that signal. As we get to the signal in a moment, just on the right hand side there you can see it at the danger aspect, the home signal there. I'm now going to apply the brakes for our stop at Oulton Broad North, and I'm going to go down to 4 on the brake gauge here, which should bring our speed off quite nicely. At Oulton Broad North station we need to stop right at the end of the platform, and it's quite a short platform. I was about to say sharp for some reason. No, it's quite a short platform, so you don't want to enter this platform too fast. Probably coming in a bit on the quick side, in fact, so I've just increased the braking to way above what I was hoping to use. We're pretty much at a full service brake application, though. As you can see, we don't actually slow down especially quickly in this particular train. So I've reduced the braking now, and the speed is coming off quite nicely. And I want to stop just in front of the signal here in the platform. Just release the brakes momentarily, and now I'll reapply, and we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Departing away from Oulton Broad North, the speed limit here is still 60 miles per hour, with around 22 miles to go to the next and final stop on this journey, which is Norwich. So along here now, I'm going to accelerate in full power up towards 60 miles per hour, and then as we get towards 60, I'm going to cut the power back, and I'm going to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to try and maintain the speed as close to 60 as possible. So now down to notch 2 of power, and I'll stay in notch 2 until the speedometer is reading 60, and then I'll cut back to notch 1, and I'll try and keep the speed between around 57, 58 and 60 miles per hour. So as we finished rounding that rather long right-hand curve there, we've now entered a jointed track section. And personally, I love the sound of jointed track. It's something I really miss in real life. But you'll also notice that we're on a jointed track section just because of how bumpy the cab suddenly is, and we're shaking all over the place, which is a bit like travelling on jointed track in reality, especially when you're travelling at a higher speed. Certainly when I travel abroad and I go on trains in other countries, I do love it when you hit a jointed track section and you're doing, say, 50, 60, 70 miles an hour plus. Unfortunately, it's becoming less and less common. Certainly in the UK it's very uncommon, and in Europe it's becoming less common, but I certainly do love to travel on it when you can. The next landmark I'm looking out for along here will be the next signal, at which point we've got around a mile to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed restriction. So we've just reached the signal that I mentioned now. I'm going to shut off the power in a moment and just allow the train to coast, just as we reach the next whistle post, which will be coming up in a moment. And then I'm looking out for the warning for the upcoming 30 speed limit, and as we pass that Morpeth board, I'll then start applying the brakes to slow us down in time. So just past the whistle post, I have shut off the power at this point and we're just coasting along, and we're now reaching the AWS ramp for the upcoming 30 warning. And as we reach the Morpeth board in a moment, you can just see it coming up on the left now. And now going to go to 4 on the brake gauge, and that should slow us down quite nicely. We're now coming up on Somerleyton station, and the speed limit that's in force is actually for the swing bridge just past the station, Somerleyton swing bridge. And as we've passed through the station here, there's actually an up gradient as we head towards that swing bridge, which does aid with the braking somewhat, and I'm just going to reduce the braking now. And you should also bear in mind that as we've crossed the bridge, we're actually on a downhill gradient. In the I nearly said in the opposite direction. I'm jumbling my words up today for some reason. Yeah, there's a downhill gradient basically straight after the bridge. So we're now on that downhill gradient. We did lose a bit of speed just because I allowed the train to coast at 30 on the upward gradient. The speed limit's now going up to 60 miles per hour, and I can be sure that the rear of the train has cleared that 60 mile per hour speed post just as we enter this light right-hand curve just coming up. And as you can see, we are gaining a little bit of speed due to the downgrade that we're currently on. And now we've reached the curve, I'm now going to go up to full power to accelerate us back up to 60 miles per hour. Once again, once we reach 60, I need to go between notches 1 and 2 of power to try and maintain the speed. This is actually a very level route, as in reality, certainly, this is a very flat part of the country. Norfolk is incredibly flat. But as a result of that, it's actually fairly easy to drive because we don't need to worry about many gradient changes. There's just a couple for the bridges there, and there's one small gradient change a little bit closer to Norwich. But other than that, there's very few gradient changes. So the general rule on this route is going to be notches 1 and 2 of power to try and maintain the speed in pretty much all 60 mile per hour speed zones. We're now coming up on Haddiscoe Station with around 16 miles to go. The next landmark I'm looking out for along here is a warning for an upcoming 20 mph speed limit, which is 0.7 miles from the limit itself. So we've now got the warning for the upcoming 20 limit. I've just shut the power off now to allow the train to coast. I'm going to apply the brakes as we reach the signal, which is just coming up in a moment. So I'm braking to around 4 on the brake gauge there. In fact, I'm just above 4, but that should bring our speed down quite nicely. Just increasing the braking slightly, as I'm not sure if we're slowing down quite quick enough or not. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly where the 20 mph speed post is, but I think I can see it coming up just ahead now, so I think our speed is going to come off just right. So our speed came down in time, and we're now doing 20 miles per hour here in the 20 speed zone. On the level grade, we need to go between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain the speed, and it is mostly level along here, but we've got another swing bridge that we're going to be crossing in a moment, and there's actually a 1 in 80 upward gradient towards that bridge. So I've just given us 2 notches of power to ensure that we don't lose too much speed here. And now that we've crossed the bridge there's actually a down 1 in 80 gradient away from the bridge, so I'm going to use the brakes if necessary just to control our speed, though the gradient does level out very quickly here. And as you've probably noticed, the sky is now getting quite grey. We're going to have quite the rainstorm hitting us in a moment from the looks of it. This scenario is using the Armstrong Powerhouse Sky and Weather Enhancement Pack, which is something I do highly recommend. I really enjoy using it in my scenarios. I think that the skies and weather look an awful lot better than they used to, that's for sure. So the speed limit's about to go up to 60 miles per hour, but at the 60 mile per hour speed post, we've only got a third of a mile to go to an upcoming 20 mile per hour speed limit, so there's not much point in accelerating very much along here. I might accelerate us up maybe towards, say, 25 miles per hour, but then we've got to quickly slow down again for the upcoming 20 limit, which comes into force shortly after the next overbridge there. So I've just cut off the power at 24 miles per hour, and I'm just going to allow us to coast, and I'll apply some light braking just as we get a bit closer to the overbridge to ensure that we're down to 20 in time, and then I'm just going to allow the train to coast at 20 until we're able to accelerate further. We're now coming up on Reedham Station, with around 12.2 miles to go to Norwich, and the speed limit goes up to 60 miles per hour immediately as we enter the platform, so we can accelerate up towards that just as we reach the sort of old, overgrown, abandoned part of the platform, about halfway along. As we accelerate away from Reedham, if you look at the computer display on the right hand side, you might see the little spiral towards the bottom right, occasionally flashing up red, and that actually means that we've got some wheel slip going on. So the wheel slip protection system, or the wheel slip protection system, getting my words jumbled up once again, is actually taking effect, and it's just reducing the power a little bit to try and prevent too much wheel slip or too much damage to the track. And now the rain is absolutely pissing it down, so I know from my practice runs on this journey we're now going to be in some heavy rain for a good 5-10 minutes or so. And once again, now we're doing around 60 miles per hour. It's between idle and notch 1 of power to maintain the speed here. We will shortly be coming up on Cantley Station, with around 10 miles to go. small gradient change here, as you can actually visibly see. We were going uphill for a moment, which is why we lost a bit of speed even in notch 2 of power. And now we're briefly going downhill again, so that's why I've just cut the power off for a moment. And then the gradient's just about to level out. So I'm just going to go back up to notch 2 of power now to bring us back up towards 60 miles per hour. We're now passing Buckenham Station with just under 8 miles to go. See the rain is starting to calm down a little, so I've just slowed down the wipers a little bit. I'll certainly increase them again if the rain starts coming down as it was. We're now passing Brundall Station with around 5 3/4 miles to go. On this left-hand curve here, there's a slight upward gradient as we head towards Brundall Gardens, which is the next station that we pass through. So I'm just going to give us a bit of extra power now to ensure that we don't lose too much speed. Now coming up on Brundall Gardens with 4.8 miles to go and 1.3 miles to go to an upcoming 20 mile per hour speed limit, which is enforced only for Loco hauled services on this route. So now cutting the power back as we're about to reach the warning for the upcoming 20 mile per hour speed limit. And I'm going to apply the brakes just as we pass the warning here. The warning's just over half a mile from the speed limit itself. And in a moment now you're going to see a lot of water come rushing down the windscreen here as the water that was gathered on the train roof now all rolls towards the front as I'm slowing down. So I'm just going to turn on the wipers just to control that a bit, and I'm braking a little bit harder as I'm not sure if we were slowing down quite quick enough. think we might have slowed down just slightly too early there, so I'll just reduce the braking momentarily. I think I can see the speed post coming up just ahead. We're now down to 20 with the speed limit immediately going back up to 60 miles per hour. So the speed limit is in force just for this bridge that we're crossing here. So the speed limit's just gone straight back up to 60, and I'll just accelerate in a moment. I'm just going to wait until we've just cleared this right-hand curve and we're on the straight bit of track, and then the rear of the train should have cleared the 60 mile per hour speed post, and I can now increase the power to accelerate back up to the maximum line speed for this journey. So now we're doing just below 60. I went down to notch 2 of power, and now I've dropped to notch 1 as we hit 60 miles per hour. And I'm just going to go between notches 1 and 2 of power for this final stretch into Norwich. The next speed changes will come into force shortly before we arrive at Norwich Station. This junction just here, the lines from Cromer and Sheringham join us from the right hand side here. And at this point we've got, just checking my notes here, I lost where I was in my notes for a second. At this point we've got around 1.3 miles to go to an upcoming 15 mile per hour speed limit. We've now got a warning for an upcoming 25 mile per hour speed limit, and this 15 mile per hour speed limit that I mentioned comes into force immediately beyond the 25 limit, so I'm now going to start braking to slow us down in time for that. So you can see a signal coming up just ahead, which is the platform indicating signal, telling us which platform that we'll be entering at Norwich Station. The 25 speed limit comes into force in the area of that signal, and the 15 limit comes into force almost immediately after that as we cross a point to the right hand side. So I've slowed us down to 15 in time for crossing this point, and then immediately after crossing this junction, the speed limit is going back up to 25 miles per hour, but we are approaching Norwich Station, so I'm not really going to accelerate much above 20 at this point, just because of how close we are to the end of the line now. And of course the route on the far left there that we are now joining is the Great Eastern Main Line down to London Liverpool Street. can now see the platforms at Norwich Station coming up just ahead. I don't really want to enter the platform here much faster than around 10 miles per hour, so I'm going to give us some light braking now and start bringing our speed down. So we're just gently gliding towards the end of the platform. I want to stop roughly as the buffers disappear from the bottom of the cab window. And we should now be stopping in just about the right place. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. And for the latest channel updates, you can find me on Facebook with the link to my Facebook page in the video description. And if you'd like to support this channel on Patreon to help me get more DLC and make a wider range of videos in the future, then please follow the link to my Patreon page, which is also in the video description. Once again, thank you for watching.